What we're going to do today, as I say, is skirt through a number of issues with regard to the Building Safety Act 2022. I think it would take a week really to even scratch the surface. So what we're doing is really sort of dealing with some of the key issues relating to the legislation, looking at how this impacts on the conveyancing process. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is to introduce Andrew Butler, KC. So thank you, Andrew, for coming along today. And
good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on the Building Safety Act 2022. My role this morning is to run through the unfortunately extremely complex legal framework of the part of the Act with which we're primarily concerned. In doing so, I'm conscious I run the risk of covering ground which may be already familiar to some of you, but I'll hopefully set the scene for Sarah to take a slightly deeper dive into some of the practical problems to which it's likely to give rise, or maybe it was already giving rise. It's right to acknowledge at the outset that while we can share with you our knowledge from a simple reading of the Act and our understanding of how it's intended to work, neither of us probably has the day-to-day experience that which many of you listening may have. Thus, perhaps unusually for a webinar, we're at least as keen to learn from you as you may be to learn from us. Now, many of you will be familiar with the basic layout of the Act, structured as it is in these 6 parts with the headings you see on the slide before you. As Ian's already said, each of parts 2 to 5 could form the subject of many webinars. For today's purposes, our focus is on part 5, other provisions about safety, standards, etc. And indeed, a small corner of part 5, that's the various subparts. We're concerned with the provisions of that part running from sections 116 to 125 under the heading remediation of certain defects. Why focus on this? Well, this is the part of the Act, along with Schedule 8, which emanates from it, which impacts on service charge liability. The statutory limitations on service charges will obviously impact on value and will thus be of significance to those involved in the purchase and sale of residential leases, whether vendors, purchasers or lenders, and by extension to conveyancing solicitors. I'll now hand over to Sarah for a slightly deeper dive into leaseholder deed of certificate and other matters.
So hopefully you can all see the first slide, which is the leaseholder deed of certificate, first kind of page of introduction, which is where we're going to start. Now, a lot that we can say about the regulations, and in fact, it could take many hours to do so. But I have in mind that really what's going to be important to you is to understand what do you need to do in the course of your job as conveyancers. And how do the regulations and indeed the provisions of Schedule 8 and the BSA impact on your role and what you'll be expected to cover off? And so with that in mind, today what I want to go through with you are some of the key requirements under the regulations insofar as the provision of information is concerned. And now, overall, where do we want to get to? Well, there are a few really key takeaways where I hope we will end up. The first one is to understand what's required under the regulations by way of provision of documents. And so the key documents here that I'll be looking at are the leaseholder deed of certificate and the landlord certificate. What do these mean? Why are they? What are they intending to achieve? And then also, what are you going to be asked to do, or what might you be asked to do in terms of verifying the information on those documents? And actually, in my research to date, and I appreciate this is a changing landscape, but the Mortgage Lender's Handbook contains, as you'll be aware, Part 2, where the various mortgagees set out their individual requirements. And there's an interesting document on that page where the banks have given some indication as to the information that they're going to be asking for, the documentation from conveyancers, but also their expectations.